So, John, how did you first become interested in aviation?
So first I became interested in aviation years ago. I was a young boy. My dad had always kind of talked about aviation. He would give me a Fly Navy sticker that he would, subliminally post on my light that I had at my desk. And, he got me one of the Citizen Blue Angels watches for my 13th birthday.
Wow.
It's just kind of one of those things. He wanted to be in the Air Force or the Navy, when he was younger. And my mom said, "Hey, it's the Navy or me." And well, I'm here. So, we saw how that one went. So he never really got to live out his dreams. So he would always kind of drop that in there, little hints and subliminal messaging. As I got older, I moved to upstate New York my senior year of high school, and my dad's like, "Hey, just go to college. It's all figured out. Like everything's already taken care of. Just go to college. If you still want to join the Navy after that, then go for it." I'm a little bit more hard-headed. I decided that no, I like doing things my own way. So my buddy went to the Marines, and my dad's like, "Look, if you're not going to the Marines, you can go to the Coast Guard, the Air Force, or the Navy. Those are your options." So I ended up going to the Navy. Got picked up for missile tech, so I got to work on submarines for a number of years. And it was interesting now going from that side of things to being a sub hunter. So it's a little different change of pace, and the view is exponentially better from my current office.
I can imagine.
So went in, was a missile tech for, from '05 until 2010, I was on the boat. So 6 years. Joined the Navy in '04, right out of high school. And then, I was planning on getting out of the Navy. I had a great time. Met a lot of wonderful people. I had worked for some incredible, human beings. But I wanted something different. I was getting kind of tired of the monotony. And it's like, all right, I need a change. I'm going to go back to New England, go to school, maybe eventually law school, work down that path. Had two senior chiefs and an XO at the time that were pretty dead set on me not getting out of the Navy. And it came up and said, "No, we think you should apply to this commissioning program." I said, "No, guys, I appreciate it. I love the idea that you think that I would fit in here and do well. But not something I really want. Like, I just want to get out of the Navy. I've had my fun. I've done my time, and it's time to move on." And the XO came up, and he was like, "I don't think you understood me." I was like, "I'm expecting your package on my desk at the end of the month." Huh. All right, then. So that pretty much set things in motion. And as I was going through the program and trying to learn a little bit about what it was, he assigned another junior officer at the time who had already been through the program to kind of act as my mentor of sorts, to set up interviews for me and help me kind of through the process. So my dad was out knocking on doors for, the people to write recommendations back home, and get all the transcripts and all that kind of stuff from school. And the other JO was helping me set up all the interviews, and it just kind of worked out in the end. And I was going through the program trying to figure it out. So, well, if I'm going to go into this, I might as well go into something that sounds interesting to me. And the top option there was naval aviator. Well, that sounds good. Like, why not? Everybody wants to be a Navy pilot. We'll go give it a shot. So I went ahead and put that down, and I wasn't really expecting much. I didn't know the real selection process for how many people they were taking. I tried to ask some of the other guys that were applying to the program. They have websites that, the chat rooms that people go on and start comparing their packages and seeing, how you stack up against the competition. Went on there, didn't really know year to year. It kind of varies how many people they pick up, and a lot of the majority for the program I was in are sub nukes or surface nukes, because it's the nuclear program that's paying for this whole thing. Mm-hmm. So obviously they're going to reap the largest benefits out of it. So the year I got picked up, there was a little over 200 people, I think, that got selected out of a few thousand. I was one of the lucky ones, got picked up, went to Old Dominion University for 3 years, got my degree in criminal justice, and then off to flight school. Got down to Pensacola in 2013, the end of 2013, did the API, the initial pre-flight indoctrination kind of deal. You learn about the basics of the engines, weather, aerodynamics, all that kind of stuff, and then you move on into primary, the T6. T6 was a sweet little bird. I had done some civilian flying in Cessna 172s, 152s, Saratoga, Some stuff like that, just kind of bouncing around a little bit. Had about 70 hours, I think, getting down there. And then once I got down there, they throw you in a Cessna again to let you finish off their little course. It's like, okay, that's fun. Jump into the T6, which that just blows a Cessna out of the water.
Huge jump.
Huge jump. At the time, I was like, how the heck am I going to go from this little 172? It's not a large aircraft, but it's just so powerful. The difference in the engine is incredible. Just any kind of capabilities. You're essentially flying a fighter from years ago. So it's a pretty sweet little ride. I don't know if any of your other interviewees have ever flown them, but it's a very fun little aircraft. And after the first couple flights, you gotta get used to the controls, you get used to the power, you get used to the rudders that you have to put in, and it just becomes a lot of fun. You aren't thinking about it so much, you're more just feeling the aircraft. And the hardest thing about it, there's no electric trim, so to kind of set there is trim. It's just there's no like half notches of trim. Mm-hmm. So go to set your thrust or set your power, I guess on a prop. It would always feel like you needed like a half notch of trim. There was never that sweet spot. So you're always sitting there just back and forth. It got a little tiring. But after that, they let you select towards the end of primary, whether you went maritime, which is P3, P8, whether you went, strike, which is fighter, tail hook, so the E2C2, or rotary. Going through, initially, in the neighborhood I lived in Norfolk, I had a couple helo pilots that lived there. It's like, man, these guys are great. They're just good bros, like always having a great time. Yeah. Fantastic human beings, always happy, never had a complaint. So I was like, I'd really like to fly helos. And I was like, okay, going through. Wow, man, if I was an engine in a helo, there isn't much glide ratio on that thing. God,
oh yeah,
that doesn't really sound great to me. And I was like, well, maybe fighters. And then just seeing how down in the details these guys got with fuel planning. I mean, they're down to the pound. And that's just not the kind of person that I am. I can't dive that deep onto every little thing. So I like playing with, a couple 100 pounds of gas here, a couple 1,000 pounds here. Like, we're good. There's a little gap. There's a little room to maneuver. I'm okay with that. So then it came down to the E6, which is the big Takamo bird, and then maritime, the P3, P8. And I had a couple instructors that were E6 people, and they were just awesome. Probably the best instructors I had in primary. And it was really pushing me towards that community. But then hearing about what they did, and they didn't really go overseas at all. So, well, I've been on a submarine for 5 years. I want to go see the world. All I've seen is 72 and fluorescent with the same 185 guys for, 3 months at a time. So I needed a little change. I wanted to go get something out of it. So I ended up selecting maritime, put it number 1, I think E6 number 2, and then strike number 3. Ended up getting picked up from maritime and then heading down to Corpus Christi for advanced flight training.
Why did you pick that?
Maybe a little bit of the subliminal messaging of my dad. He always wanted to fly something with big wings.
Yes, yeah.
And it always sounded kind of cool, and that's always what I heard about. Yeah, I watched Top Gun. I watched all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it looked cool. I thought about doing it for a while. And then I had a couple of the instructors who were the fighter guys, and just how down in the weeds and details they were with fuel planning and everything. It was like, okay, they're so serious all the time. And I was a little bit more laid back mentality-wise than some of that. And I understand why it has to be that way. I mean, the things they do are incredible. I just don't necessarily always have the mentality for that. So I need a little bit more cushion. That, and I wanted something with big wings. I wanted something that had a refrigerator on it. Had a bathroom. I could get up, walk around. Has a coffee maker. It's not a bad deal.
Always good.
Oh yeah, and well, I'm sure we'll talk about it later. But between the P3 and the P8, just the difference in kind of some of the technology on it. I wanted to fly the P3 for the historical aspect. I'm a huge history buff. I mean, I have probably a couple hundred military history books on the library here. And I love history. I love military history. And just to be able to be part of something like that and to say I flew that aircraft would have been incredible. But then all the extra work that you would have to do to I guess, learn that manual, learn all that, and then transition over into another aircraft. It's just and a lot more work that wasn't necessarily worth it at the time.
Of course.
So going through all this training, I am married, 2 kids. So trying to split your time between that and having some kind of balance in your life, it got very difficult. So.
But then you went on to fly the T-44C, if that's right. What was that like to fly?
It's essentially a King Air 90.
Right.
Great little aircraft. The thing is built like a tank. At least that's what it felt like flying it.
Yeah.
Damn near indestructible. Just a fun aircraft. You sat in there. It felt like you were one with the aircraft. The T6, you could never really get comfy. The ejection seats, they aren't built for comfort. You're doing hour and a half long hops at a time. But the King Air, you just kind of sit in the seats. It just feels good on you. And you feel like you could take that thing anywhere. You do a lot of flying with a lot of instrument flying, a lot of contacts flying. You just get very comfortable with that aircraft. It was a great little bird. You can go do cross countries almost all over the United States. It's got great legs on it. You can reach almost anywhere. So, it's a fun little aircraft. So my first thoughts going into the P-8 were, holy crap, this thing is huge. You don't really realize the enormity of it until you're standing next to it. And yeah, it's a 737, essentially a 737-900. But just going through the training from a 172 to a T6 to a T-44, I thought a T-44 was a pretty good sized plane. It's like, all right, well, I'm bouncing around in this twin engine little aircraft. I got all, glass cockpit on here. It's great. And then you get to the P-8. Man, there's a lot of planes still behind me when I'm sitting in controls. Like, it's just a weird feeling. The simulators that they have set up for us are fantastic. The visuals in there, everything is exactly as the aircraft is. When you land, the only thing different, I would say, majorly is the landing. In any simulator, I'm sure it's the same way. The landing is going to be a little bit different in real life than the sim. It's just not perfectly modeled. But the continuity, the simulator itself provides fantastic training. You can get anything you need from that. So I thought we were well prepared getting into the aircraft for our first flights, but it was still a pretty humbling feeling when you're sitting there at the controls hand flying this thing, because you're not really used to the autopilot all that much yet. Going through primary and advanced, you do a lot of hand flying. You don't use automation that much. Obviously, I want you to brush up on your hand flying skills. But the P-8, and the biggest thing with the P-8, the transition, it's learning to use the automation. They want you to use the automation because that's how you're going to start offloading some of that pilot load, so you can then use some of those brain cells to think in the more tactical realm, start helping the guys in the back how to better employ the aircraft on station. So that was kind of the big mentality shift is, hey, I don't need to be gripping these controls 24/7. I have an autopilot for that. I still need to monitor everything, but I can then use that brain power elsewhere in a better fashion. So that was the biggest mentality shift.
So how much ground training did you have before your first flight?
That's a great question. Couple months, I think. You do ground school, you learn about all the different systems, and then you go from there. You have maybe 12, 15 simulators, something like that. I'd have to look back in the records, but you have a substantial number of simulators prior to them letting you touch a $250 million aircraft.
Yeah, so. Of course. And we have to talk about your first flight in the P-8. What was that like?
From what I remember, it was pretty incredible. It was kind of one of those things where you go into it and then you black out and then you come out the other end and you're like, wow, I don't remember a lot, but that was incredible. I remember walking out to the aircraft, doing the pre-flight, and just the amount of information I was trying to take in that the instructor was teaching us as we're walking around. He's pointing out all these different things. It's like, what the heck? I'm just trying to figure out where to walk into this aircraft. And he's pointing out all these different little gauges and stuff on the outside of the aircraft. And wow, what the heck is all this stuff? All the different flaps. He had the flaps lowered so you could see the whole configuration. I remember that. And then he talked about where the weapons bay is and all kind of the external stuff in the aircraft. Man, I'm just trying to figure out how to sit down in this seat. It blew my mind. It was like I said earlier, it's a very humbling experience. The first couple of landings, I remember the first couple of landings were not bad. Luckily there was no crosswinds. It was a nice, easy day where we went. I think it was up in Tennessee area. Nice, no winds, nice little hills. Countryside looked great. It was one of those landings where the first one, it was a little firm, and then they just kept getting better. It's like, man, I'm landing a 7 by myself. This is pretty sweet. So that kind of boosted the confidence a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So how does it differ from a normal 737?
Really just all the stuff in the back, all the electronics. The front of the aircraft, we don't get 737 type ratings anymore.
Okay.
I guess when the P-8 first came out, the FAA hadn't caught on yet, so a couple guys got some 737 type ratings. And then, I don't know if it was the FAA or the Navy, realized, hey, if these guys are getting 37 ratings, they can jump to the airlines pretty quickly. This might not be the best investment. So I'm sure there's a little backdoor deal and like, hey, we want to, this one off. Understandable. I mean, they invest millions of dollars in our training. They don't want people jumping ship right away. I get it. Yeah. It was just one of those things that you just kind of chuckle about. It's like, yeah, okay, understand. But yeah, really, if you park us, so we have the C-40s. They're the little 737s that the rotators use back and forth to all the different areas. And you park those next to us, and we're a lot longer than them. 737, 900, 800, they're significantly longer. So that's about the only difference. We can carry 21 people on board ours, whereas I don't know what the heck a standard 737 could carry, probably 130-ish, somewhere in there.
Like that, yeah.
A lot of those seats are just taken up with electronic cabinets and Sonobuoy storage. So
yeah. So we have actually talked about what's the main role of the P-8?
So main role is anti-submarine warfare. That is our bread and butter. That is what we are great at. We are probably, besides other submarines, the best platform out there at the moment. So you have your anti-submarine warfare is what we kind of got sold on. That's how we got our aircraft. We've started doing a lot of ISR, so some of the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, so flying around, taking pictures, all that kind of stuff. Doing MDA, maritime domain awareness, so going out, just doing, I guess, fishery notifications, stuff like that. So search and rescue, that's kind of our big thing that we've been getting into recently. I've done a lot of search and rescue, and actually up until about this last deployment, I'd done, I want to say, more search and rescue than I had ASW.
Wow, really?
We had been deployed to Japan. I had never flown in an adversary submarine. I had done a lot of search and rescue out of Guam. You have the Pacific Islanders who would take off in a little canoe, middle of the night in the Pacific. What the heck are you thinking? Next thing you know, we get a call to fly from Japan to Guam to conduct search and rescue.
Wow.
Which, I mean, that I would say search and rescue is almost harder than ASW. One, you have to find this little bobbing head, which we're Navy. We aren't the Coast Guard. We don't train to search and rescue necessarily. So we don't really know what we're looking for. We're still kind of trying to build our search and rescue capabilities and awareness, I guess. So what does a floating person look like from 1,000 feet, from 500 feet? We just didn't know. What sensors could we best use to try to find somebody? So being able to provide that kind of information and assistance to people, it's very rewarding. We did one off the East Coast. It was a U.S. sailor that had fallen off the back of a ship during bad weather. And that was probably one of the hardest missions I'd ever done. It's one thing when it's somebody that you don't know, you can't relate with. You're just out there, you're doing your mission, and you're still going to do your damnedest because you know that person has a family that desperately wants them to come home. So you are going to do everything in your power to help them and to try to bring about a positive resolution of the situation. But it just brings it up another notch when, it's a fellow E5. I was an E5 once on the boat. I was second class. So it's an E5 that falls off the back. He was just trying to do his job, and somehow a wave came over or something, and he went over. So horrible weather. There's rain squalls. There's wind. 10-foot seas. We're going out there. I flew 3 missions on that, and at the end we ended up having to call it off. It was too bad weather. Never found them, and that was probably the toughest mission I'd ever taken part in, because it's just something that you you feel for him, you feel for his family, you feel for his crew. You've been that guy in a situation. I was a ship's rescue swimmer when I was on the submarine, and I almost fell over one time in bad weather. So it's just like, oh man, you really sympathize and kind of bring that level of concern up a couple levels. So,
of course,
so search and rescue is a big one. We just got a search and rescue kit that we can start deploying for people. I think VP8 just did it for the first time and saved a couple of people out in Guam area. I think that's the biggest stuff that we kind of take part in. ASW, ISR, search and rescue. Those are kind of our bread and butter that we spend the most time on.
Yeah, we'll get back to that in a bit, but how does the P-8 handle? Is it a nice aircraft to fly?
Oh, it's fantastic. So this is the other huge selling point vice of P3. P3 is yours. I guess the pilots would swap controls sometimes up to 15 minutes, 45 minutes, somewhere in there, because it's just so tiring. The autopilot barely works on the thing. So they're doing a lot of hand flying. They have the flight engineer working away, doing all his stuff. In the P8, and you have a lot of the vibration because of the propellers and stuff in the P3, so you're always shaking, and just the noise in and of itself is enough to tire you out. I never realized how much noise affected you until I went from the T-44 to the P8, and noise itself can be exhausting. Just having to listen to the engines turning all the time. So that's the big selling point with the P8 is the aircrew endurance, I guess. We have a very stable platform. Every time you fly on a 737, you don't feel tired at the end of it. The pressurization system works great. You aren't bouncing around. There's no real big vibrations. It's a very smooth flight, relatively quiet. Autopilot works fantastically. So you have all these factors coming together. You aren't sitting there fighting the aircraft, staring at your controls the entire time. You're able to take your eyes off, kind of adjust, walk around. It's a lifesaver. You can operate much lower, much longer. You can operate higher, faster. That's the other big selling point with the search and rescue kind of stuff we were talking about earlier. When we went to Guam, the Coast Guard gave us a search plan. They only had stuff built for C-130s, which is, I guess, kind of like a P3 with their speed and endurance profiles. And we would search the entire box that they would give us in about 45 minutes into an 8-hour flight.
Really?
Okay, so we would go over that same spot over and over and over again. But just by having this aircraft, you can fly longer, faster, higher, more efficiently, and provide more time on station for whatever you're doing. We have air-to-air refueling coming online. I think the first couple squadrons have already gone through, and they did it for the first time a few months back, I think. So that's another capability that we're getting to make us even that much more effective. So,
yeah. So, can you talk us? I don't know if you can, but is the cockpit the same as a standard 737, or is it different?
Yep. So with the exception of there's this little thing called a weapons control panel where you have controls for sonobuoy release and your weapons bay doors, stuff like that. There's a tiny little panel, maybe a foot by a foot space down in the little console. Other than that, it's essentially a 737.
And it's all glass cockpit, I'm assuming?
Yep. All glass cockpit. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 displays. Not kind of like the 737 NG Max or whatever with the two little, that would have been sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take what I can get.
Yeah.
Full glass cockpit, 737, everything's the same. You can go from this thing, you can walk out and, 737, you're flying Southwest or American or, Ryanair or something like that. They say, oh man, the pilot just had a heart attack. We need somebody to fly. You can walk right up in there and go have a great time. So, besides that weapon control panel, you're looking at a green 737. Right. We have a few more radios, UHFs, SATCOM, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That a standard 737 doesn't. But they also have things we don't. We don't have that little text message thing that they can send.
Oh, yes, yeah.
The guys in the back have it. We don't have it up front. So they have their tactical chat rooms and stuff like that. We don't have that up where we are. So that's their little, I guess, one up on us.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, you might not be able to talk about this, but how many crew do you have and what's actually in the back of your aircraft?
So we carry 9 crew members on any flight. So you have 3 pilots that do a rotation. So about every hour and a half, you'll get out and rotate. Off-duty guy will go in the back, and we have full reclining crew rest seats that they can go take a nap in, and then obviously use a bathroom, coffee, refrigerator, stuff like that. Moving further back, you have 2 NFOs, or WIZOs for Air Force style. You have a senior guy, the tactical coordinator, and then the co-tactical coordinator. And they're back. The co-tactical coordinator is dealing with a lot of the message traffic going back and forth, monitoring chat rooms, seeing if tasking's being updated, sending messages off. And the tactical coordinator is kind of looking at the big picture, what's going on for whatever mission we're doing, whether it's ASW, search and rescue, ISR. For ASW, he's monitoring what kind of buoy patterns you're putting in the water, where we're placing our aircraft in relation to where the submarine is. Are we in the best vantage point for acquiring contact in the submarine? In ISR, are we in the best spot to get the best pictures? Are we collecting what we need to meet the requirements of that mission? For search and rescue, are we utilizing our aircraft and its sensors to the best capability that we can to maximize our search area while still trying to get the best eyes on for whatever we're looking for, whether it's a person floating, a capsized boat, something like that. So that'll determine whether you want to use a radar, whether you want to use camera, visual, whatever. So he's kind of keeping that big picture viewpoint of that. And then you have 4 sensor operators. So you have 2 acoustic and 2 electronic. So the electronic, they're monitoring the electronic signals, radars, bands, and all that kind of stuff. The acoustic, it's essentially a sonar operator, but in the air. He's just looking at the buoys, looking at the little grams, and then trying to figure out, based on that, where the submarine is. When I was on the sub, I tried qualifying broadband operator. I'd qualified everything else I could qualify, and I was bored. So I went to the sonar check. I was like, hey, let's sit down. Let's start trying to qualify. And I got about halfway through that qual card, and it's just, what the heck are you guys looking at? Wow. You get the basic gist, you get the solid lines and stuff like that. But then just how they relate that then to different directions and speed increases and decreases. It blows my mind what these guys can do. They are absolutely fantastic. So every flight I try to go into the back and talk to them for a little bit and see what they're doing and ask questions. And I've been able to get in the seat a couple times, not on actual real world missions, but on training missions. They've let me sit down and kind of mess with it, try to play around with the system and see if I can do anything with anything back there. And usually I can't. And they kind of, okay, sir, get out of the seat. You're right. Yeah. So another qualification. So you have your pilots. You have your 3P, your 2P, and your PVC. From junior to senior. Then you have your enlisted operators, your 4 air crew in the back, and then the 2 NFOs, the WIZOs in the back. And on top of those qualifications, you'll have what's called being a mission commander. And they are, whether you're a pilot or an NFO, either one can be a mission commander. And it's just whoever is senior or whoever makes that decision at the time on the flight schedule, you're going to be the mission commander for that day. So they're in charge of the overall how to execute it. Now, that doesn't mean they make all the decisions. In the end, they do, but they should be taking input from everybody, because NFOs don't really know a whole heck of a lot about flight planning, about fuel calculations, about stuff like that. and we don't know a whole heck of a lot about what they do. We try to in our upgrading processes. We study a lot of their stuff, but then after you're done qualifying, you go back to doing mostly your specific job. So you get rusty on some of the details that they're really good at, and they get rusty on the details we're good at. And then you have the enlisted operators who are subject matter experts in what they do. Whether it's what the radar ranges of certain radars are, whether it's acoustic ranges of submarines, they have all this stuff memorized. Not that they need to. I mean, they can have it written down in their little books. But these guys are fantastic. They have memorized. They have all this information.
Smart guys, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, incredibly smart. So you'll all come together and do what's called mission planning. You'll get tasking that says, hey, this is what you're going to do for that day. So you'll all get together, maybe an hour or two before your brief, kind of come up with a game plan, what you're going to do, how you're going to execute it. Then you'll go into the brief, you'll brief what you're going to execute, and then you'll go and do it. So typically you'll show up, 2 hours early for a brief. You'll brief. There'll be a 3-hour pre-flight. So then you'll have 3 hours from your time you brief to get out to the aircraft, get everything going up, get the systems, up online, check all the radios, check all the communications, and then you go fly in maybe 8 to 9 hour mission. I think my longest one when, we were out in Bahrain, we were just doing MDA, flying around the Gulf there, Straits of Hormuz, all that kind of stuff. It was 10 hours, 11 hours, I think, somewhere in there. It was just one of those spots where in that part of the world, for some reason, we were flying in the perfect band for fuel conservation, and we were burning damn near nothing compared to what we normally do. This is great. So you're flying around for hours and hours, and you're still getting back with some extra gas. So, all right, well, here we go.
So we haven't talked about your squadron yet. What squadron are you based with?
VP5 down in Jacksonville, Florida.
And is that the only squadron that flies P-8s?
No, so we're still in the middle of transit. Well, not in the middle. We're getting towards the tail end of transitioning squadrons. We have a whole bunch down here in Jacksonville, Florida, and they have a whole bunch up in Whidbey Island up in Washington. They kind of closed down Hawaii for a lot of the P3s and moved them up to Whidbey Island. Just another consolidation thing. It helps out, especially parts-wise. You have all the P8s kind of in two different locations, makes it a lot easier logistically. So they're still transitioning a couple squadrons. I think 2 or 3 are left to go through and go from P3s to P8s. So they're still working on that.
So would you say that P8's a massive asset to the US Navy?
Absolutely. The things that it can do just in crew comfort is a big thing, not necessarily on a tactical level, but crew comfort, the legs that it provides, the capabilities it provides, and future capabilities that I'm sure they've thought about, they just haven't told us yet. The platform, it's built to last. The P3 was good for what it was, but it was just getting old. So now there's that break-in period, I guess, where we have this new aircraft and we're still trying to get some of the capabilities that the P3 has, just get them working on the P8. We're doing a good job of it. They're making a lot of headway, and there's going to be some great future capabilities that'll come online later on down the road, which will far surpass what the P3 could do. So in the long run, especially with it being a 737, you have worldwide 737 support. If it really came down to it and you were mission essential stuff flying to the Middle East, you lost a tire on landing or something. Hey man, I'm going over to, Delta. I'm taking one of your tires. We're rolling. I'm sure if it came down to it, we could do something like that. And that's one of the selling points on the poster I have back there.
Yeah, we can.
And had for the P8 is it 737 worldwide fleet support. So it brings a lot more assets to the game, and a lot more capabilities, which with being a newer aircraft, you're going to have probably at least 20, 30 years worth of use out of this thing,
Of course, yeah.
which is only going to make it a more robust platform. The air-to-air refueling is going to be able to increase the legs time on station. So it's a very exciting time to be a part of the community. You're still in the forefront of it, trying to come up with new tactics, trying to come up with new ways to employ the aircraft, trying to come up with better ways of doing things, maintenance practices. They're still trying to hammer all that stuff out. They haven't hammered out proper manning for a P-8 squadron yet. So still trying to figure all this stuff out. It's very exciting. And just seeing how some of the new pilots come in and the advances that they're making, it's pretty cool.
So obviously, you probably know that the RAF have bought a few P-8s. Are you involved in any of the training or the introduction for the RAF?
So I've worked with Australians and some of the RAF that you guys have out here. Actually had a couple of them as my instructors going through
Wow.
the FRS. So some of the best ones, actually, because you guys do things a little differently. You stay on a platform for 20, 30 years.
We had the Nimrod, didn't we? Yeah, so...
Yeah. And the NFOs, I mean, they don't go do shore tours as much. It's just, you guys do things a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. So you guys are experts in what you do. Mm-hmm. It's fun seeing their viewpoint on how things should be done, I guess, and how excited they can get about certain little differences and procedures. And
I can see in your face there, you think you do it better than us. I can see it right there.
I would say that we're proficient with what we do,
right.
But you guys are very proficient with what you do.
Right.
And yeah, I guess New Zealand just bought four P-8s. Are bidding on 4 P-8s, and it's and that's the other big thing. All the allies are getting them. They're all over the world. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a lot easier to work with those allies instead of having to go P3 to P8 because the communication suites are different between those. So being able to everybody kind of be on the same page makes things a little bit easier too. So,
what's the top speed of the P8 and how high can you go?
Max ceiling is going to be 41,000 feet. I think I've only gotten up to 370. 3738, the highest I've ever been. And ground speed wise, I think I've gotten 550.
It's pretty impressive.
Somewhere in there, ground speed wise. And that's with a kick and tailwind too. So, take that for what it's worth. But, like I said, standard 737. It's not going to be anything different, not anything crazy. I mean, we don't have any super special Whammadine engines on there or anything. It's what you get. So.
Yes. But we had one question from a Twitter viewer. Did you have any memorable sorties that you can share with us?
So one of them was those 3 search and rescue flights I did for the U.S. sailor off the East Coast. That will probably be burnt in my mind for the longest time just because of the emotional connection that you have. Some of the best one, I think, was my last flight in Greece, this last deployment. We were out there flying around and doing 24/7 coverage of a submarine out there. And it was just a lot of fun. The small crew that you fly with, you really start getting close. I mean, you're essentially flying 8 hours, have 12 to 18 hours off, flying 8 hours. So you're always around these people. You're eating with them, you're flying with them. You're in a plane locked together for 8 hours at a time. So you get to learn a lot about these people. I work very well in small groups and kind of getting that tight knit camaraderie, and that's something that I think I really missed from the submarine days. We had a lot of camaraderie. Some of the best people I've ever worked with in my life were on the sub. And for the first time in a long time, I started feeling that camaraderie again when we were flying out of Greece on the 24-hour flying. And my last flight there, the sun was perfect. It was just one of these crystal clear, calm days on the water. We had another P-8 out there that we were you do your turnover, so you have constant coverage, and you're just nice, close flying. It was one of those where it's just like, man, I can't believe I'm doing this right now. It is perfect. Everything is lining up fantastically. Yeah. And then when we got back to Greece, came in, and instead of doing just a normal approach, we came in, overflew the airfield and did a break and came around and landed. Yeah. Everything. It's one of these stupid pilot nerdy things, but everything just lined up perfectly. The airspeeds were perfect. Air was smooth. Everything all the wickets were met for just coming in. Everything was perfect. Nice, smooth touchdown at the end. Man, did that really just happen? So I would say that was probably, my most memorable flight. It was my last flight out of Greece, before getting sent back to Italy. So.
Oh, it's terrible getting sent back to Italy, isn't it? Yeah.
It's horrible.
Must be awful, yeah.
So I have about January, February. I rotate out of here and go on to whatever my next orders are. I still haven't gotten those yet. Hopefully staying in Jacksonville and getting to work more with the P-8 and kind of help the capabilities increase that we have. Start testing new things, coming up with new ideas, new tactics, training some of the new pilots that are coming in. So those are kind of some of the options that I could get into. I'll hopefully find out here within the next month or so what lies ahead of me. But
because if I'm correct, I saw on your Instagram you're an instructor now. Is that on the P-8?
Yep. So an instructor in the squadron. I just got that about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So that then puts you in line to either you can go to the Maritime Weapons Tactics School. You can go to VP30, which is our FRS. You can go to the wing here, Wing 11, be one of the instructors at the wing. And those are kind of the jobs people want. Mm-hmm. You go because the weapons school is kind of our version of Top Gun.
Right.
So you get to go do that. It's like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Yeah. VP30, it's another one of those that, it's a great job. You're teaching the new guys, you're forming the minds of the new pilots coming into the airframe. You can really set a great standard, great ground level for them to kind of base what they know of the P-8 off of. So that would be a very rewarding job. You get to see somebody from the beginning, then you see them at the end. Some of my instructors that we had going through, they are now at the squadron. So they kind of saw me in the beginning, and now they're seeing me at the squadron, how I operate. And that would be a very rewarding thing. Seeing all that hard work that you put in come back. So
do you have any hobbies?
Yeah. So like I said, a lot of reading, military history. That's kind of my thing.
Yeah.
Love golf. I was talking to my wife the other day about this. I'm getting in that midlife crisis. Growing up, I was always the physical guy, the baseball, soccer, lacrosse, all that kind of stuff. And now my body doesn't like that so much.
Yeah.
The aches and pains kind of set in and stay longer, and the recovery isn't as quick. So I've had to kind of scale that back and go to golf and reading books and hanging out with the family, going on trips with them, bike rides with the family. Trying to get that good home work balance.
Yeah.
Still working on that one, but
you'll get there.
Yeah.
So, is there an aircraft you would like to fly in the future? It's probably a tough one.
Oh, yeah. So I follow a couple other pilots on Instagram, a whole bunch of them, and one of them, 787 Dreamliner pilot.
Oh, right.
That looks awesome.
It looks futuristic, doesn't it?
Oh, it's incredible. I got to fly on one when we were transitioning between Japan and Bahrain. The last deployment, we were kind of doing site swaps with some of our crews, and I flew a Dreamliner from Japan to Qatar, I think. And wow, even in the back of that thing with three big dudes next to each other,
you still had space.
Comfortable. It's got the cool little self-dimming glass or whatever the heck is on the window.
It's weird, isn't it?
It's really cool. So anything huge like that, a 777, an 87, 747 would be fantastic. Just the glory days of the Queen in the air. That just, it's a beautiful aircraft.
So where can we find you online, John?
So the Instagram, the Will Fly for Beer.
Great. I love that title. Yeah.
Just thought of that one last deployment.
Yeah.
Man, I got to think of something funny, and just happened to have a beer in my hand at the time. It's
Works
like,
perfect.
That works. So yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram, not really on Facebook all that much.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it. I don't have a lot of time for the social media and
course.
all. It's between work and home. It's bouncing around, and staying really busy. So, if anything, I'd be on Instagram.
Perfect. And finally, do you ever get sick of talking about aviation?
Funny you ask that. So I'm not the most well-versed when it comes to civilian aviation. I'm pretty good with the military history, military aviation, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And my wife asks that all the time. She's like, don't you ever get sick of talking pilot stuff? And you get a group of us together and yeah, oh, hey man, how'd you shoot the other day on the range, playing a round of golf or something? What beer did you drink recently? What baseball game did you go to? And then inevitably it'll always go back to, oh man, when I was flying, when I was doing this, we don't do that. We don't do that.
Yeah, pile of hands, yeah.
But yeah, it inevitably always comes back to some kind of aviation thing, whether it's squadron life, whether it's ground job stuff, whether it's flying, some situation we ran into, and that's how we learn the best, by swapping those stories, because you learn best by others' mistakes or things that they've done right, and how you should do them. So by keeping that narrative going and keeping that talk progressing, you're only bettering yourself and all those around you. So. We try to do that a lot, and it just shop talk goes into a lot of that. And it's like, works both ways. So it's entertaining and you learn.
Of course. Well, John, I want to thank you very much for being on the show and giving your time to us. And I know our viewers are going to love your interview. And thank you again.
Anytime. Thank you for letting me be on here. It was a pleasure.